Okay, today we're going to talk about a very important step in prepping your custom figure parts to get them ready for primer and paint. We're going to be prepping the joint area. This, as you can see, the factory color is pretty close to what I'm going to stay with, but they put a white ball joint swivel in there. So I'm going to want to paint that to match so that it blends in when I have my figure done. When it comes from the factory, it's pretty tight. This hard plastic doesn't take paint very well at all. You can even see where they had tried to paint it from the factory, but their factory paint didn't even hold. It rubs off. But we're gonna do away with that paint rub. We're gonna make paint hold. If you look at a side view of it, you can see the raised edge, raised white edge. We're essentially going to do away with that. This is one that I've already prepped. As you can see, side view of it, pretty much done away with any exposed white that you can see. Another example, as you can see here, there's not very much gap at all. Compared with this guy, we got a nice decent gap in there, so that when we paint, it's not going to rub our paint off when it articulates through the joint. The way I do this is with a multi-speed rotary tool. The bit I use is just like a little dentist burr bit style bit. I usually keep my speed set about halfway. I think that gives you not wide open so you're going crazy, and it's not so slow that it's barely cutting. About halfway, it gives a good clean cut on the piece, which is important because you don't want any burrs and frays and little ground pieces of plastic left off. I also use an X-Acto blade to trim any extra burrs that would be on there. You can scrape them off with the edge of the X-Acto blade. Make sure you can check your gap, make sure everything's nice and clean on your joints before you paint them.
Okay, for this clip, the Dremel itself was a little too loud to hear me over. So basically what you want to do is you're going to slowly take off a little bit of material at a time. You're going to keep your bit parallel to the surface you're working with so that you get it nice and flat and you don't have any uneven surfaces on the edge. Try not to get into the edge of the limb around the actual joint, and just slowly take your time. Take off a little bit at a time until you've got a surface that is smooth and even with the edges of the figure around it. For example, this joint is white. When I hold it sideways and look at it, I want to be able to not see any white sticking up over the silver parts of the actual figure part. So I'm just going to let you watch me Dremel this thing away with it sped up and listen to the music. And I'll get back with you on the next clip.
Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take, I've got like it's a synthetic terry cloth type towel. Got to take that and we're going to rub away any excess we see up to the edges. Once we get up to the edge, a little emery board nail file. File off these edges here. Get rid of any loose pieces that are left over from dremeling. Any filings and shavings. Off good. And I use a synthetic because it kind of it's like it generates a little more friction and helps rub off any excess. I see one little bit right there. And it's good. Flip it over. Same thing on the other side. Give it a good little rub on my little cloth there. Show me any problem areas. Sandcloth. Now, take your X-Acto blade. Check in our joint here. Make sure there's nothing jammed up in there. Same thing on the other side. Check our joint. Make sure it's nice and clean on that end. And there you have it. Now that won't rub off paint whenever you go to put it on there. Because you can put your level of paint on and you've got a nice gap, a nice travel through to the other side, so that your joint part is not going to rub. Okay, the next step in getting a good paint job on our figure and not having joint rub is primer. This is a Badger airbrush brand, self-leveling, water-based acrylic polyurethane surface primer that I use. It's great primer. Also suggest Acrylico's Vallejo makes a great surface primer. It all just depends on what color you're going to paint to what color primer you're going to need. For this, I'm just going to use a brush, put a little primer on these guys. I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of color change. Badger primer, as you can see, it drips out. I mean, it's the same good consistency of a good quality acrylic paint. I'm just going to take my brush, a little bit, paint on a little coat. Now I don't mind if I overlap just a little bit, because even though we're staying close to the same color on this piece, it is going to change a little bit. Just like with your paint, thin coats. You're going to do one little thin coat, make sure everything's good coverage on it, and you're going to let it dry. Another thing, make sure you've got your joint extended all the way to one end, and then you're actually painting. There will be your overlap right there that you just got to paint. Anything that's going to be exposed. I normally don't paint up above the flange of the peg, because that's going to be buried up inside of the arm, and I don't want the excess in there for rubbing around when it's articulating. It's just that simple. Prime it. Once this dries, come back in a few, say 15 minutes or so, put another nice little coat on it. After that, let it cure for a few hours. I usually let it cure for 2 or 3 hours. Then I'll come back and actually put my color on here, and you'll see a tremendous difference. Okay, now that our primer has had a chance to dry and cure, we're going to add a little bit of color. I'm using Acrylico's Vallejo Gun Gray. And you just want to paint thin layers of paint. I'm going to go ahead and paint the sides as well. Thin layers. You don't want it too thick. Don't want it to gum up. And with a good paint like Vallejo or Citadel or Model Masters, you know, your paint flows anyway, so it doesn't take a whole lot for good coverage. And there we go. The other one I've already painted. Now, Once those dry, we'll flip the joint to the other side, paint it, check and make sure once again that we don't have anything that's going to rub, and then we're going to seal it, and we won't have to worry about it rubbing off when we articulate our figures. Alright, on to the next step. Okay, now that the paint has dried that we put on our elbow joint, we're going to want to roll it to the other side where we paint the other side. I always like to take my X-Acto knife and come in and find the seam and just run your X-Acto knife up it. You don't have to put any pressure really, just fold it out away from it a little bit. Same on the other side. See our paint on this side, so come in, thin layers, and get the other side painted. Okay, now for the last step in keeping our paint from rubbing off our joints. I'm going to use super glue, the original super glue gel. Got a little bit of it already out on a post-it note here. What you're going to do is take a toothpick, little small bit on your toothpick, paint it over the painted section of your joint. Cover the paint up good. All the way down to the bottom. And you want just a really, really thin layer of your super glue gel. Tip of the toothpick, just right on the actual hard plastic part of the joint itself. A little thin coat of the super glue gel. Once that dries, we'll do just like we did when we painted it. Take our X-Acto knife blade, go into the side of the actual joint, just to open it up a little bit in case the glue set up a little on the sides. Move the joint all the way to the other end. Put our little coat of super glue, tie it in with the other super glue on the other side, and then it's sealed. It's not going to rub off. Your super glue is going to hold it there, and you can pose your figure to your heart's content. You're not going to rub off of your joint. Give this a little bit of time to dry, and I'll come back, get the other sides, and then we'll actually see the joint articulate in action. Okay, our glue has had time to dry, so what we're going to do is we're just going to roll the joint around to the other side, give it a nice little coat of glue. Spread it over. We've already rolled this side over. So, one thing I did do before I rolled it over, just take your X-Acto knife, lay the blade in, and just roll it over from side to side. And that just opens your gap, just in case whenever you were spreading your glue, in case you got a little bit in there, it just opens it up and lets it so that it glides freely. Excuse me. And then on this side we'll do the same thing. Take a little bead of glue. And rub that right over. Then once that dries, we're going to have rub-free joints. Excuse me. Now, with anything, I would recommend before you try this on good figure parts that you only have one set of lower arms, I would take some scrap pieces and practice. Get some old junker figures, some old arms you're not going to use, or legs that you're not going to use, and practice. Practice makes perfect, as with anything. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Once again, be sure to show us some love on the video. Like it, share it, subscribe to our channel. Thank you all, and may the force be with you.